Move on to our next panel, which is where to from here. We're going to speak to SPOR units from around the country. I'm just going to look up on the stage here. I'm going to join these ladies up here on the stage, and we've got 4, soon to be 5, I think, virtually. And so we want to talk about what is SPOR look like around this country. I'm going to start by asking Catherine Smith, is that right? To introduce yourself, and then scratch that. It's not Jennifer Smith. It's not Catherine Smith, it's Jennifer Campbell, correct? It's okay, we roll with these things all the time. Right, Blair?
We'll switch the mics.
And I've got the wrong mic.
We'll
Hold on just a second.
To the panelists.
You get that one. It's not on, but it will be on. And I get this one. Thanks, Blair. Okay, so we're going to start with Jennifer Campbell from CAHR. And I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and then just talk about where SPOR units came from a bit. Oh, we got to turn it on.
So hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Campbell, and I'm a manager at CIHR. I'm a manager of the SPOR program at CIHR. And I'm really thrilled to be here with all of you on behalf of CIHR. And I'm honored to be part of this milestone event for Yukon SPOR unit. And I'm here with a couple of other CIHR folks that I just wanted to mention. Deepa Sankaran is an associate with the SPOR team. And also Jane Rylett is a scientific director of the CIHR Institute of Aging, and she's here as well. So great to be here, the three of us on behalf of CIHR. And I'll just say the whole SPOR team really did want to be here, the folks that you deal with day in and day out, but unfortunately that wasn't possible. So I just wanted to reflect back on the official launch of SPOR. It was back in 2011, when at the time the Honorable Minister of Health, Leona Glukak, she articulated a very ambitious but clear vision for SPOR, that by putting patients first, we would make sure that research will have a greater impact on the treatments and services and better integration of research into clinical practice for improved health outcomes and better health services across Canada. And the first SPOR support unit was launched, support units were launched in 2013. And so really here we are today, over a decade later. And for those of you that are familiar with SPOR, you're aware of how much has been created with the SPOR support units, the other SPOR funded entities, including the networks, the SPOR Health Data Platform, the Canadian Data Platform, as well as the SPOR Evidence Alliance, with so many partners and stakeholders, because really it's not CIHR's SPOR, it's Canada's strategy for patient-oriented research. So the SPOR units are foundational for SPOR, and they help provide the means to connect the research with the patients, which is really what you've heard this morning is what SPOR is all about. And they also provide a critical focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and mobilizing research evidence to inform healthcare practice and policy. And each support unit is meant to be unique in the way that it serves the unique needs of their particular region. But the vision was also that these support units would collaborate and work with the other SPOR support or the other SPOR entities and really bolster patient-oriented research across the country. And so this panel today, and really the next 2 days, are really about that sharing of knowledge and learnings to help each other, really, to create and to help this new Yukon SPOR support unit. So I just also wanted to say that the SPOR support unit here in Yukon, you've really been working hard to lay the foundation for important work that is to be done. Building those relationships is really key, and something that I think other SPOR support units and entities can learn from. So just wanted to congratulate you on that, and I'll pass it back for now. I'll jump in later.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. So we're going to go to some of our virtual panelists first. I'm going to start with east to west. I'm going to go to Newfoundland well, because that's where Cass is from and I love her. So I'm going to ask our Newfoundland rep from SPOR, Catherine Street, to go and introduce herself and then speak to what you think briefly your SPOR unit's strengths are of your unit. Then we'll go to New Brunswick, and then I'm going to go to BC, and then Northwest Territory. So I'm going to go east, west, up, back here. Okay, it'll be a geography lesson as we go. Catherine?
Hi, thank you everyone. My name is Catherine Street. I'm the director of the Newfoundland and Labrador Sports Support Unit, and I'd just like to thank you all for inviting me to join this panel today. And before I start to tell you a little bit about the strengths of the Newfoundland Labrador unit, I'd just like to say that as a newcomer to Canada, as you can tell by my accent, I'm very British, but as a newcomer to Canada, I feel it's important for me to acknowledge the territory that I now live on, which is in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. And it's the ancestral homes of the Beothuk. And I would also like to express my thanks and appreciation for this beautiful land that I now call home. It's certainly very different and much more beautiful than the inner city Birmingham that I grew up in the middle of England. So what are some of the Newfoundland Labrador Support Unit's strengths? Now, I was thinking about this yesterday and I thought, well, this might sound a little contrived, a little trite, but this is really what I believe. I think the core strength of the unit that I manage, and I'm very lucky in this, is that the team members really do see the value in the work that they are doing and believe that through working in partnership with patients, policymakers, providers, the community, we really can bring about real change in the provision of healthcare services and policy. I've actually, for this panel discussion now, just nipped out of our Patient Advisory Council meeting. And it's been our first Patient Advisory Council meeting for 3 years because, of course, COVID. And it was so refreshing and so nice just to be back with people and to see the energy and the enthusiasm within our patient partners and the staff members who are there in that meeting about the work we're doing, the interest, as I say, the energy. So that's one of our strengths, that true commitment and belief. And the other one is really for me, fluke of where I landed when I came to Canada. I landed in a very, very small province. And because we're in such a small province, we have a very close working relationship with our partners. I remember in the early days of SPOR, we were asked to write a conflict resolution policy for our steering committee. And the steering committee all looked at me as if I'd gone completely crazy. They were like, why do we need a conflict resolution policy? We've known each other for so long. We probably know the name of their dog and their cat. We are very happy to just sit and chat and talk things through. So I've been very lucky in that the unit that I manage is in such a small province and that we do have those relationships with partners. And yes, partners change over time, but we manage to keep that closeness and that informal approach going. And I think the partnerships have been further strengthened by our unit being open to new ideas and joint working. So if somebody comes up with an idea that we hadn't thought of, then yeah, let's look at it. Let's see what we can do. And just one other strength I'll say is very early on in the Newfoundland Labrador Sports Support Unit, we were very active in sharing the results of our evaluation studies. We have a document, and it is unfortunately a document, quite a thick book now, that's called Practice Points. And we share that with healthcare providers, policymakers, the communities. It's in our local libraries. It tells people about the work we've done for the previous 6 months, what we found, and the reason we call it Practice Points is it indicates to policymakers, clinicians, physicians, etc., how they could change their practice to perhaps deliver better healthcare. So those are what I'd see as our 3 key strengths of the Newfoundland and Labrador unit, but I'd be delighted to hear what other units think as well, and how, Michelle, your unit feels what your strengths may be.
Great. Thanks, Catherine. I always like it when people talk about how small their province is compared to us. I'm going to go to New Brunswick with Marina Hamilton, please.
Hi, thank you. So my name's Marina Hamilton, and I'm the director of the Maritime SPOR Support Unit. I'm actually based out of Nova Scotia in Halifax, and I guess one of our strengths is the fact that we are working across three of the different provinces. So we are, I guess, the only support unit um, that works across more than one jurisdiction. And while, I'd say the big advantage of that is that we have all of these unique expertise and perspectives to draw upon, learn from each other, and harness some of those ideas, and we get to then scale them up and implement them across those areas. So it's been really quite exciting to have some ideas that maybe came from New Brunswick that then we're all benefiting from, or from Halifax, vice versa. I think it's just been really exciting to have that group that we can build from each other. Very similar, I guess. We're usually not just Maritimes, but Atlantic, and so very similar aspects and considerations. So again, I find the team, like in all of the 5 sites across the Maritimes, they're just incredible staff, very dedicated and hardworking, but certainly very committed to the concept of patient-oriented research. And I think, again, being comfortable over the years of being advocates and really being empowered to kind of speak up and say, well, have you thought about maybe approaching this, and bringing that patient voice forward? So I think they're always looking for opportunities, and feeling confident and committed to helping people look at things maybe, again, a little differently than they have been. I'd say, just in terms of some specific skills and expertise that is unique in the Maritimes, we're very fortunate that we actually have 2 health sciences librarians. So yes, and we take consults from across the country. No, but it gives us the opportunity to really provide that evidence synthesis and summaries that our partners are looking for, and has really provided us with unique opportunities to work with the Evidence Alliance, because we do have that skill set, and other partners like WHO, the Public Health Agency. So I think that's a very unique skill set that isn't necessarily one that each support unit has established. The other thing, again, being small, and you kind of, develop your networks, and who to call, who's an expertise in this area, or who's the decision maker working in this area, so you can really be an effective knowledge breaker, because you can't, we've tried different ways of trying to capture that information in a more strategic format, but it goes back to just who knows who, and who's involved in things, so you can make those connections. But I think, again, that's advantage to be in 3 small provinces, that we can do that. The other thing that I'm really excited about is that we have some leaders in our provinces involved in, some significant changes around EDIA, and looking at legislation, and being advisors to government, that are also working with us. So we are benefiting, and as well as the whole research ecosystem, by having the science leads that are engaged through the MSSU to now provide consultations on EDIA, Indigenous engagement, and sex and gender considerations. So it's just been really exciting to have those new scientific leadership individuals working with us. So sorry, I don't want to take all this time, because very excited to be part of the MSSU, and all of the work that we're doing. So thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and share that, and learn more from others. So thank you.
Thanks, Marina. So I don't want you to think there's no SPOR activities happening in the middle part of the country, because there are. We did have a representative from Saskatchewan, but I believe he's fallen sick, and so he's not able to join us. So I'm going to jump all the way over to BC and ask John Ward to introduce himself and tell us a bit about his SPOR unit strengths. Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is John Ward, and I'm based in Vancouver on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I have been in Canada for 15 years. I'm originally from England, as you may know from my accent. I grew up in Devon, which is in the southwest of the country, kind of like the leg that kind of sticks out. So I'm very happy to be here in BC, and I'm very happy to be here with you all. I wish I could be there in person. Chocolate croissants sound wonderful at this time of day for me. I did have a nap during that little break, so I'm glad I was able to take advantage of that. My role in the BC support unit is to work with outcomes and evaluation. So I'm supporting a lot of the work that we do to report out to all of our funding partners and to the public, and then also evaluating some of the projects that we've been doing. I think our strengths in BC I kind of narrowed them down to two main ones. I think there's a lot of good things that we can talk about, but the first thing I wanted to kind of mention was just the nature of our model here in BC. We had, I believe, like 12 funding partners initially when we started on this project. So that necessitated a distributed approach to doing the work. So although we have, a main office kind of located in Vancouver, we actually got teams located all over the province, and the staff and everybody on the team, I think, has been like a key to enabling a lot of our success. So I think that's kind of one of the things that I think is quite strong. And the second thing that I think we wanted to kind of talk about as a strength was we did something a little bit different to some of the other provinces and focused a little bit more heavily on methods research. So not just necessarily doing patient-oriented research, but actually looking at the methods research itself and convening large priority setting exercises with patient partners and integrating patient partners onto a lot of the projects that were supported. And I think we saw a lot of there was a lot of challenges with that, especially during the start of the pandemic, because a lot of things shut down. But I think that work was really, from my perspective, it was quite transformative. We saw a lot of researchers who were quite new to the idea of engaging people with lived experience in their projects, and they embraced it, and they kind of developed capacity to be able to do that work. And we saw a lot of great projects come out that were actually co-led by patient partners in fields that were quite diverse. So I think that's something that I think has been a big success for us. So those are two things I can talk about right off the bat, but I'll cut it short so I can get on with the introductions. But thank you.
Thanks, John. That's great. We're going to go to Northwest Territories, our neighbor, where I don't know if you folks enjoy it, but I enjoy it when it's colder over there than it is here. So we'll go to Dr. John Zoe in Northwest Territories, please.
Well, thank you very much. My name is John B. Zoe. I'm a member of the Tlinchenko Nation. I was the former chief negotiator for the settlement of the land claim, which came into effect in 2005. So we've been in operation for about 17 plus years. When we first were introduced to the SPOR unit about 5 years ago, we joined forces with other First Nations, people like on the governing council. And the first thing that we've done is rename the SPOR unit using an Indigenous language, which means Hutitseda, which means that an overall health and wellness. It's an old word from a long time ago. And so the members of the governing council are the Tlinchenko government and the Department of Health, GWT, and the Inuvialuit Regional Corporation, and the Gwich'in Tribal Council, and we have a couple of rotating members, which is the Delneguti government and the University of Alberta Department of Medicine. And and a lot of the work that we do is looking at how we're gonna operate. And in that operation, we have a long history of colonization that goes from the fur trade all the way to the lands removal, to the treaties, and finally getting a chance to vote in Canadian elections back in the early 60s. And since then, we've kind of been involved with a standard of education that was a standard of health that was very far apart from the Canadian standards. And after 61, we became eligible and were kind of thrown into the system without regard for our relationship to our land, language, culture, and way of life. And so that's what we bring to the table is in the Northwest Territories, we say that the patient is actually the First Nations, because we never bothered to make any accommodation. We just threw them into the system, and there's no way of plugging in. And if there's a crisis, that's when we get carried away, or things like that. And so we're now into the second phase. The second phase of we've completed our first year. We've done our evaluation, and we've done a number of things. And 50% of our staff is Indigenous, and so there's a good balance. And we have our offices located in Yellowknife. So I'll just leave it at that for now. Masi.
Thank you. Before I go to our next panelist, I want to recommend a research project for SPOR. Why are so many British people leading SPOR units in Canada? Dr. Michelle Leach.
I don't know how that happened. I'm not going to introduce myself again, and I also promise this is the last time you will see me up on this stage throughout the conference. I will not be here any longer. In fact, we're going to have many, not that I'm not going to be here any longer, I will be in the audience. We have many fantastic speakers that are going to be taking over for the rest of today and tomorrow. In terms of our own unit strengths, I think, I look out into this room and I see all of these wonderful, incredible faces that are here and that are here to support our unit, as well as all of the people that are joining virtually. As Lyris said when we introduced ourselves this morning, 1 year ago, it was just her. There are now 8 of us. 8 of us. That just shows you how passionate people are about health research, supporting patient-oriented research, and bringing a voice to people with lived experience in this territory. Also, similar to what Catherine Street was saying, we have the advantage that while landmass-wise, the Yukon Territory is large, people-wise, we're small, and we build relationships and we make connections. And I think that's really important for our unit moving forward. And I think that's going to be a really good strength for our unit.
Great, thanks, Michelle. I'm going to move on to the second question. I'm going to ask our friend Marina Hamilton and the Maritime SPOR unit to start, and then I'm going to go back to our friend in Northwest Territories, and we'll see how much time we've got. The question is, in what way, in your opinion, has your SPOR unit grown uniquely to suit the needs of your province or provinces? Marina?
Yes, thank you. So as I was saying, with the 3 provinces, we do have 5 sites. So 3 of those sites are within New Brunswick. So within that, one of them is in Fredericton, which is the capital of New Brunswick. And so they are very much associated with the government. So while they're situated at a university, their data center essentially had very unique legislation, unique to that really from any other province, where the data center is legislated to actually be a data custodian. So, and they've been legislated as the center for doing government research. So they really had those, legislative supports that really then enabled them to have this role of doing research for the government. So that's been a very unique direction and special focus that they have. With the other site, so in New Brunswick, the health system delivery is essentially separated into francophone or anglophone, and so the anglophone system is called Horizon Health Network, and the other is the francophone is Vitalité. So we do have a support unit site embedded within both Vitalité or as well as within Horizon Health. So again, it's been really unique because being part of Horizon Health, the team there gets to look at all research projects. They get to actually make that suggestion about, have you thought about involving a patient and bringing their voice into this project? And as well, they are working very closely with one of the clinical trial leads. So they often are involved in some of those cancer focused projects, as well as those that are brought to Horizon Health. The one in Moncton, again, Vitalité has almost like a direct line to them for support for their work. And then within PEI, that site is based within the University of PEI, but they also have a Center for Health and Community Research. So again, there's a lot of support for one another in terms of priorities and really kind of dual objectives being achieved. In Halifax, while we are situated within and hosted within the Nova Scotia Health, so it's the health authority, I'd say we work equally around the providers as well as the Department of Health in terms of identification of priorities, and working with the universities as well to look at strategies around, we have a project coming up in the spring around community engagement around poverty. So I think there is a lot of, form follows function, but it's really kind of unique and exciting to see the different ways in which the 5 different sites have matured and kind of taken on their own areas of focus. So thank you.
Thank you, Marina. Over to you, Dr. John Zoe in Northwest Territories. Same question. Question again is, in what way, in your opinion, has your SPOR unit grown uniquely to suit the needs of your territory?
Well, thank you very much for the question. What makes it unique is that what we bring to the table. We know what health is about. We've had it for at least 150 years in Canada. And we were thrown into it, like I say, in the 60s. But what was lacking in the health delivery and the health management and health design was that anything that's been done to us is mostly on the Western side, but it doesn't take into consideration our values that we bring with us that might be foreign to the system. And so this is a way of bringing awareness to the system that, look, we have really strong ties to land. And on those lands are natural medicines, and we have our own healers, we have our own medicine people, We have our own things that we relied on before the system came into being. And part of the land is the ability to introduce young people to the landscape, to learn about their own trails, where their ancestors used to live, where they're buried, and the stories and the legends that are related to that landscape, so that we start building the wholeness of the patient. The information is there, but it's always been oppressed by the system. And this is now a way for us kind of express things that has been hidden for a long time. And that's what makes it very unique, because the land is full of place names, and it talks about our beginnings from our beginning of time and to where we were before colonization. But the people kept a log of the colonization in the place names, which are more of an intrusive nature. The other one is our language that we need to use. We need to develop our language to talk about the Western medicines and the way that things are described, like all the diseases that were shown earlier. Well, how do we make our language adaptable to that so that it's uniform for everybody and everybody knows what we're talking about, especially internally? And so those are the things that we're talking about. And during COVID, we had to develop a new way of communicating using our language. And when we talk about language, it means that we have to consult with the elders to make sure that we're using the right terminology, and it's in tune with what was used before colonization, so that we're not leaving anything behind. We're actually bringing it forward so that we can start using it ourselves, because it's part of our health, overall health, mental health, to know that we can express ourselves in our language and in a written way too. And the other one is the culture. Our cultures, our expression of our cultures, the way we dress, the way we speak, and the way that that we celebrate in our dances, and all the things that are related to the celebration, the annual gatherings, where a lot of this expression comes out. And there's young people get attracted to it, and they start to learn all these songs, they learn all these chants, and they get to hear people speak in the language all the time. And with the Tlincong government, all the proceedings are being done in the official language of the Tlincong. And so if somebody is there that only speaks English, we'll provide the English translation. So that's very important. And the last one is our ways of life, because we might belong to a tribal group, but we also have our own areas of operation, and those are our ways of life. And every summer there would be gatherings of all these groups in different areas of the landscape, and that's where they share information about where the movement of animals, any new activity that's happening that might be foreign to it, and some of the in later years where those developments were happening, and the contaminations that were happening, new roads are being built, the hinterland is now being exposed, and there's competition. There's competition for our own food products. And they come to a point back in 1960 when we first got to vote for the first time in Canada, that the pressure of all these systems of Western society just bear down on the people. And so they couldn't really leave the community because, everybody's obligated to send their children to school. There's no jobs, there's no housing. All the things that Western society had to offer was devoid. And so this is really about a strengthening exercise for us of what has been brought down to a point where, we really need to rely on the elders that remember all these stories and all these connections to our land, our genealogy, and the place names, so that those are that's our big book, the story of the landscape. And we need to teach our young people to taught by the elders about what that land means to us. It's our wholeness, and that wholeness has been interjected by colonization over time, 150 years. And so it's not going to happen overnight. But with the SPOR unit that is around health, mind, body, and spirit, that's what really counts. And if we can use our own methods to build people back up, especially the young people, that they can also, with their full strength, go to the universities and go to the school with themselves without being torn down at the door where your hair is cut and you're deloused and your clothes are removed and your moccasins are taken away and you're given your issue clothing and you won't see it. It's given back to you at the end of the school year, and sometimes you've grown so much you don't fit into it, and that's the way you go home. And so it's like how do we reclaim all those kind of things? Well, we have to go to the toughest parts personally and collectively. And in this case, it's in a partnership with universities. It's to do research using our own methods, and those methods we need to find interpretation of that with the elders and knowledgeable and knowledge holders from our communities, so that we can raise them to the level that they have been accustomed to in our world. Because right now, on the Western society, there's very little recognition for that. But the onus is on us to give recognition for our natural teachers. Masi.
Goodness, geez, lots to think about there. Thank you. So dare if I say, I think often I think of our SPOR unit as the younger cousin. And First Nation way, older cousins have the responsibility to guide and give advice to younger cousins. So I'm going to ask SPOR's older cousins to see if they can provide some advice. What advice do you have for the Yukon SPOR unit as we grow and develop? I'm going to start with our friend on the far east coast there for Newfoundland and Labrador. Catherine, what advice do you have for Yukon SPOR?
Sorry, I was just having a few problems unmuting then. Thank you for that. And I'd just like to say thank you to Chief John Zoe for what he just said. And what he just said has made me realize that not only do I have advice for Yukon SPOR, but I also have taken some learning for myself in just a few minutes, in that the question that was asked previously was, how does your support unit meet the unique needs of your province? I've just listened to what was said and thought, the Newfoundland and Labrador support unit meets the needs of the Western, to use that term, culture of Newfoundland and Labrador, but doesn't meet the needs of the Indigenous communities. And that is something I am taking away from today to address. So I thank you for that, because that I can feel myself going a bit red, I think, because I feel a bit guilty because we've not done what we should have done. So I thank you for that, Chief John, very much so. So sorry, the question again, could you just repeat the question? I was a little distracted just thinking about the previous answer.
It's okay. We were all distracted. There was a lot of information that our doctor from Northwest Territories shared. So the question to you is, what advice do you have for the Yukon SPOR unit going forward?
Okay, so my advice to Michelle and Lyris and the team is to be as open as you can with your partner agencies. We've certainly found that that has helped us in taking forward the work we have done. So I would suggest bringing people into the thinking, the planning and the development stages and take their advice, listen to it and hear it. Patient-oriented research is still relatively new. I know Jennifer said that it all started in 2011. 11 years in health research isn't very long, so it's still relatively new. And we need all the ideas we can get to make this work to fit the needs of all populations and communities within Canada. And through that, only through meeting all those needs can we bring about the required changes in policy and practice. And the other bit of advice I'd give is really to trust your patient partners. They're the ones who've been through the system and can speak from experience. They know what their treatment was like. They know how they felt when they were going through treatment. And I think it's listening to them is key, or listening to our patient partners has been key to our successes. And often they will bring different viewpoints, things I'd never have thought of. And we really need to listen to those viewpoints and learn from what they're saying to us. That would be my advice to Michelle and the team.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm going to go over to John Ward in BC. John, what advice do you have for your younger SPOR cousins?
Thanks. I mean, I have a lot I could say about this, so I want to be succinct, I guess, and we can always have a conversation another time. And just wanted to say that, yes, as the evaluation person for BC, I'm always happy to help you if you have questions and you want to chat about that. Advice, I would say, the thing that I've learned here is that, yes, as Catherine said, to listen. I think flexibility, I think, has been important. There's a tendency that we have to kind of be quite rigid in terms of how we think, because everything appears quite set in this ways. Like academics have like a very specific idea of what they want to do. Healthcare providers have a specific idea. And I think we have to be flexible to kind of help people get outside their comfort zone a little bit. And so that kind of goes into the next thing that I was going to say, is that the other advice I would have is about sort of recognition that change is going to take time, and it's an ongoing process. I think in BC we made some mistakes early on in the fact that we assumed that because people wanted to get engaged in this work that they would do it. But people don't always know how to do these things, and so we didn't give them the right supports to actually meaningfully do the work that they wanted to do. People with lived experience wanted to get involved. We didn't, support them in the right way to kind of be involved in these projects. Likewise with the researchers, we weren't supporting them the right way to actually do this work and hear from people with lived experience. So I think over time we figured that out, and that's when we started to see a lot of great work come out. So I think that kind of notion of like being aware that just change is going to take time, but ongoing support can kind of help people to kind of move one step at a time to kind of get where they want to go. So those are a couple of things just off the top of my head that I think what I would suggest. One of the strengths that we didn't talk about just in terms of how BC was set up, but it was what I kind of mentioned at the start was our distributed model. And I think that was important because it put people on the ground to be able to listen to the local context. So we had staff, in the north and in the interior of BC working, on rural and remote concerns with patient partners there. We had people in Fraser and on Vancouver Island doing things that were very specific to their health population needs. And I think that's kind of that's kind of a way to kind of ensure that you are listening, is to kind of have use technology, use the nature of your territory to kind of make sure that you can get people on the ground to kind of hear the local context, and that way you can kind of do more meaningful and more effective work. So that's my 20,000 sort of feet pitch in terms of advice.
Thanks, John. Spoken like a true older cousin. Lots of good lived experience advice there. I'm going to go over to Marina. Marina in Maritimes there. Marina, what advice would you give to Yukon SPOR unit as we grow?
Yeah, thank you. So I think my comment would be picking up really on what both Jennifer and Catherine said. Jennifer said, the SPOR is not CIHRs, and it goes back to what we were trying to convey is it's not like the leadership of the Maritimes, it's the entire community. So it goes back to that collaboration and hearing what is it that is needed and how can we provide that support to our research and patient and public partners and decision makers. So it's really about making everybody feel that they're a part of it, that it's not just us as leaders doing it. So I think that then, follows after that with collaborating with people, finding those mechanisms to really hear those perspectives. And I think, one of the things, and it's kind of changed my mind recently of a conversation with somebody, that it's really about bringing diverse and different perspectives together, even like we're doing here today, because we're all hearing different perspectives and learning from each other. And I think that is the key to really, a support unit, is having the ability to bring those perspectives together and learn and inform our path forward. And I guess I'd sum it up in a simple phrase: it's not getting there, it's how you get there. So yeah, thank you.
Great, Marina. Thank you for that. Some wise words there. Over to you, Dr. Zoe in Northwest Territories. What advice would you have for Yukon SPOR unit?
I think the biggest thing is communication, communication, as well as receiving it, because in Indigenous world, there are celebrations that happen in the communities constantly. There's internal recognitions, there's information sharing, and then we have our AGMs where you have community celebrations and you have nations, regional celebrations, and you have provincial celebrations, you have national celebrations, you have international celebrations. Those calendars don't show up in the Canadian calendar, but they happen every day. And here we're doing a collaboration, and so we're part of it. And so we're not devoid of things, but it's that energy that needs to be captured and accepted and recognized and supported, because we've, like I was saying earlier, we've been gutted out by the early trade of our food products and legislated away from us. And our lands have been removed from us by the 1763 proclamation. And the treaties have put us into the Indian Act, away from society. And the only way that he can participate in the Canadian mosaic was to give up your identity. And nobody wants to do that. And that's why we're always behind that closed door. And now through SPOR, like we're doing now, our voices are now being heard, that we are thinkers ourselves. We have a lot to contribute, and but the big but is we want to bring our wholeness to the table. We want to ensure that we don't leave anything behind, as was in the last 150 years. But we want to share our knowledge, because a lot of the decisions that are being made in Canada, in the north, is that our lands are being polluted. It's affecting our food sources. It's affecting our ability to go to these places without fear. And our languages are not being used in public places, like on the roads, on buildings. We need to reclaim our names. And we need to, an expression of our culture is the clothes that we wear, of natural products. They come from the land. They're not polyester. They don't pollute anything. They naturally go back to the land. And those are the things that, a lot of these things are starting to show up, because, people are starting to notice that we can participate in these kind of things. And our ways of life, of going into the landscape to renew ourselves, to gather strength and to learn strength with the guidance of our natural teachers, our elders, that have that knowledge that we need to recognize and tap into their resources, and even certify them on the Western Front, so that so that their voices can be heard, because they have that form of title that's noticeable on the Western side, but is already recognized in our own worlds. So communication has to go both ways. And the listening also has to go both ways. And the method of implementation has to take into consideration the two ways. Masi.
Chase, thank you. I'm just going to see if Jennifer has any advice that she wants to share, and then we're going to go to Michelle for last comments. And then we're going to open it up for questions, people. Get your questions ready.
Okay. Yeah, I just have a couple of remarks about just what a fabulous and what activity this is, and the next 2 days will be, and just some of my aspirations and thoughts about and excitement around this new SPOR support unit. And so I think back to this morning when we heard from Dr. Catherine Smart, and she spoke of many different challenges that the Yukon faces, access to care, the healthcare workforce, the data infrastructure, and the aging population. And so, I think about the gentleman who was on the plane as I was coming here and telling me of his family and how he has 4 children. His second child had complications and had to be born, but had to be born in Vancouver, and so he wasn't there for the birth. So I think about those tangible, real life challenges that people struggle with and face here. And so having people at the table to identify those priorities for research, and the fact that the Yukon University, as it's new and growing, is going to be foundational in having that patient-oriented research approach, I think, as they grow and develop. And that will be something I think unique for Canada, in fact. And if I could just say that I'm really hopeful that with the SPOR support unit here in the Yukon and in the North, that the impacts of colonialism and the effects on people here can be, alleviated, and people can be healed in part because of the support unit and what it will do.
Thanks, Jennifer. Michelle, over to you for any final thoughts on all of that you've heard.
Thanks, Tosh. I mean, it's just having some really, really great advice from everyone, and hearing all of that. I think, we are very unique in the Yukon because, as we put up the stats earlier, 24% of people in the Yukon are Indigenous, and 11 of 14 First Nations are self-governing. And we can really rely on building up those relationships within First Nations, listening to them, hearing what their priorities are, working with them. What do they need? What do they want the SPOR unit to achieve? How can we support research within their communities? How can we support people with lived experience, ensuring that we hear the communities as a whole as people with lived experience as well, because our communities are very unique here. And I think that's really important. I also think, where Dr. John was talking a lot about language and communication and how important that is, that's something we also hear a lot in the communities. And I think, how do we support that as a unit within our communications, how we're communicating with people, how we move health research forward, and incorporating language into that, I think will be really important. And, we will rely heavily on First Nation governments to help support us and help guide us as we grow so that we can grow in the right way.
Great, thanks, Michelle. I'm going to open the floor for folks that may have questions, maybe other than why so many British people. I already asked that one, so you have to think of your own question.
It's our wit.
It's your wit. There you go.
Our charm.
It's your wit and charm. A good answer, Michelle. Any questions from the floor here? Do we have any online? Any comments or questions online? Molly's looking. No? Okay, if you do have questions and comments, Michelle, as she said, is not going to be back on the stage, but she will be in the room. And Lyris, the woman single-handedly responsible from going from 1 person to 8 in a year, is also here. But can we get a big round of applause for our panel speakers? And goodness cheese for all of you from joining. There was a time change, so I don't know if it's afternoon or morning for you. We stay the same now, which I love. So either good afternoon or good morning. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Goodness cheese, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day. I understand our next speaker is in the house. You may remember, or you guys can go now.
Oh yeah.
Thanks.
Should I give you this?
Yeah, you could take your.
I'll take my. Yeah.
No, I'm good. You could give it to.
I'll give it to you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Sorry, I'm not always the most subtle person. Diane knows. So our next speaker, you might remember him for from such TV shows as Yukon Government's COVID-19 Update or C-SPAN. Dr. Brandon Hanley is in the house. Yay, come on up. We're gonna switch. Okay, we're switching. You get this one. You're supposed to use the stairs. Risk assessment, people. Stairs. There you go, Dr. Hanley. It's yours.
It's mine.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I had to rearrange myself to get my notes. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. And my notes are pretty sketchy anyway. What I was going to say is I've turned into one of those people that doesn't get to stay at meetings, which is unfortunate, especially for something like today, because this is such an interesting event and gathering for such an important and kind of momentous, I think, point in our health history as a territory. So you can probably be able to tell as I go through it that I do have some emotional attachment to SPOR and the beginnings of SPOR, and seeing it start to take off is actually it's a pretty amazing feeling for me. But before going any further, I just want to acknowledge with gratitude where we are in this beautiful building by the river. This piece of heritage of the Kwanlundun First Nation, and that we are grateful to be on the shared land of Kwanlundun First Nation and the Tan Kwachan Council. So the things I wanted to just, I guess, go over was I guess building in that theme of culmination of how we got to this day, and the kind of the research environment that's culminating in the formation of SPOR. It really is kind of an exciting time to be here. I remember in my days as over the past few years in my previous role as Yukon's Chief Medical Officer of Health, playing a supportive role and participating in some of the advisory work that led to this, with a few people doing a whole lot of work to get it to give it the roots that it needed. And every now and then, I think we kind of knew what we were aiming for, but at the same time, it was always hard to articulate what it was that SPOR actually was. And I remember having these conversations that trying to kind of explain what we were trying to accomplish, other than building on research infrastructure. And so, every now and then it would be like you're trying to explain to someone, what exactly is SPOR? Like patient-oriented research, what does that actually mean? And that's a bit of an iterative process, because I think as you learn from other units around the country, as we kind of build the case, as we consult, and as we get input, it becomes more and more clear what the vision is. And I just love the way that it has culminated now in the vision. When I was reading what you've put together on the website, which is the Yukon SPOR unit champions co-created health research in the territory that is grounded in partnership among Indigenous and non-Indigenous government and non-government institutions. And then further on, a future where health research is developed and owned by the people of the Yukon, where the perspective of people with lived experience is of primary importance when determining research. And it was like, yes, that's what we were trying to say. And now you've kind of reached that point that you can actually articulate what this is all about. So congratulations, it's really beautiful to see. So I just had a few reflections, on the theme of how exciting it is for research in the Yukon. From a kind of a national landscape, I think there's more and more awareness within the country of the North and what the North is and how important that is. We have a Governor General, and in a Governor General from Nunavut, we have, I think, been able to demonstrate more of a presence. And on the maybe the not so good front, we've been able to demonstrate, I think, effectively how critical the acceleration of climate change and the climate crisis is in the North, and really bring that to the national description of Canada's climate crisis. And of course, this is a time when Arctic sovereignty is getting renewed attention, particularly after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And I think it's come to a redefining of what Arctic sovereignty really means, way more than a defense kind of a point of view. And then there's another whole theme, and that's that we have, just been through or are still living through the long tail of a pandemic. And so we have crunched and stretched health capacity. I think it's brought a sense of fragility to our health system. We know that our health system is in a critical state in terms of staffing shortages and lineups, and we hear it on the news every day, and we know that that's reflected locally as well as around the country. But to me, it also the pandemic highlighted the need for research to inform policy, and I think that the more we can build our capacity, the more we can use local research to inform local policy development and really start to be better at developing and closing that research circle. And on the same theme, I think it brought out limitations in our research capacity. There would have been things through the pandemic that I would have been dying to be able to quickly undertake in terms of research studies, some of the unique experiences that we had during the pandemic that could have been informative, not only for ourselves, but for future planning for the pandemic and for the country to know about. And we really, we were so busy managing the pandemic, we really couldn't, as was everyone, that I think that research capacity was definitely stretched. But of course, at the same time, the pandemic demonstrated that we could rapidly innovate, and that whether that was innovation shown in the communities and amongst the First Nation communities, whether leadership, the strong leadership was brought out or within, and implementation of bold policy measures to address risk. That's what we did in the pandemic. We did things quickly and boldly, and I think that showed an example of what can be done by taking risks when not doing something is also a risk. So that was another, so that whole kind of pandemic learnings is another great theme to inform research and how we do research and what we were missing. But we're also, the other theme I think is that we're in a new age of Indigenous reconciliation and sovereignty. And so we are again unique in the country for having 11 out of 14 self-governing First Nations. We see the increasing strength and leadership year to year, and the increasing recognition of the importance and even of working in government, developing the government-to-government relationships that our First Nation chiefs and governments have been asking for. And we see that progressing and developing, and I think improving year to year, whether that's at Yukon level or at Canada level. And I think we're seeing also an increasing engagement of Canadians with Indigenous culture, language, and history. And of course, many of the tragedies of Indigenous people have been brought much more to light, whether we're talking about the children's burial sites, the missing and murdered Indigenous women, the James Smith Creek tragedy, again, the accelerated climate change and threats to infrastructure and communities in the north. They've all focused our attention, I think, on the need to continue the path of reconciliation and reconciliation. And the other theme is that the development of Yukon University. So over now in its second year, we've seen that building of capacity and building of research capacity that has been such an important part of the development of the SPOR unit. So we have now an academic institution grounded in the North, grounded in Indigenous culture, and with that scientific capacity along with use of Indigenous knowledge. So again, uniquely placed, and tremendous years of hard work to get to where we are now, proud to have a university here in the Yukon. And then the other theme is that we've had government at the table. Yukon government, the interest and the collaboration and the engagement of Yukon government's health and social service, and certainly the office of the CMOH when in the development stage, when I was part of that office in being able to support the idea and the bringing home of a SPOR unit to Yukon as apart from Nunavut, the last jurisdiction to have a SPOR unit. So all to say, so those are, I think, where all of the grounding themes that have I think allowed for this amazing moment and amazing opportunity to now move into the future with this research capacity. So now we have these opportunities so that we have a unique body that can answer questions from the ground up, fundamental questions of importance to Yukon First Nations, to all of us as whether it's patient experience or lived experience as Yukoners. There's enormous potential for collaboration, whether that's international, national, or among us as partners in research. And of course, there's the opportunities for education, for training, capacity building for our territory. And to give us really, for the first time, that solid research infrastructure to harness Yukon-based experience to develop our own capacity. So, so once more, I think the Yukon is poised to show Canada and the world how small jurisdictions can do great things when given the trust and when given the dollars to do it as well. So, by the way, I'm Yukon's member of parliament. I think I forgot to say that at the beginning. So you see, I was so enthusiastic, I just kind of jumped into the tribute. But yes, I've been a year in this role. So as a member of parliament, it's with great pride that I'm here today and being able to share some of this, some of my pride, I guess, with you. And I want to congratulate all of you who've been involved in the development of SPOR. Special congratulations to Michelle and Lyris for being in the leadership positions now and pulling off this summit. So thanks to you, and that's all.
Thanks, Dr. Hanley. You can tell that he's relatively new as a politician because he's still got lots of time left. So that usually politicians, I'm like, 2 minutes, but not Dr. Hanley. He's a man with solid timing. That's great. I was going to open it for questions, but he's sitting down, so you have to stalk him if you want to ask him a question while he's going around. He's sitting at that table right there, and then you can have. Oh, do you want to take questions? You're okay.
If there are any, sure.
Does anybody have a question for Dr. Brendan Hanley? MP. I forgot to mention that you were the MP too. Questions? You're good? Wow, this is a room full of really nice people. Thanks, Dr. Hanley. Appreciate your time very much and your praise for SPOR. That's great. So it's 11:53. It's really tough to be the MP before lunch, but he pulled it off. So we're going to break 4 minutes early. 4 minutes never happens on facilitating day one. So for those of you online, If you could please be back online right around 11:55, that would be great, 12 o'clock. We do have a jam-packed afternoon. Sorry, not 11:55. You can have a couple minutes. 12:55. That'd be great. Just make you stare at us while we eat lunch. How rude. 12:55, if you could be back, that would be fantastic. For those of you in the room, don't forget about the amazing opportunities in the artist room. There is a local beater, Montana from Copper Beating, that is doing some fantastic work. Jared's like, yes, I've been there. There's a bunch of traditional medicines and lots to learn there from Donna Wolf. And of course, there's our mental wellness supports, and Diane Strand somewhere in the room for healing. That's also available. I think lunch is ready. Anybody? Somebody buy the big metal thing. Is there lunch in there? Anybody? Oh, thank you. Okay, so lunch is not ready yet, but it will be shortly, but we are going to take a break. And so 12:55, folks. Thanks.